just introduce the panel very quickly. We've got Jason Grift from Booking.com. We've got Michael McCartan from Duetto. We've got Paul van Mierendonk from Ideas. We have Niels Meckenkamp from Info EasyRMS, and last but not least, Casey Davey from Busy Rooms. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will realise that there aren't any hoteliers on the panel. So, this is the point where any chance you have during the next 45, 50 minutes, if you're a hotelier and you want to challenge them on anything that they're saying, just stick your hand up, old school. What we want to do really is look at what's going on from a revenue management perspective, where it is at the moment, what are some of the challenges and the opportunities around revenue management and hotels, and what the entry of the likes of Booking.com into that world means for them, means for these guys, and what it also means for hoteliers as well. What we're going to try and do now is just get into some of the operational, the nitty-gritty of what's going on in distribution and revenue management. So we'll start on the end with you, Casey. Let's just kind of set the scene for us. What is the kind of the state of the nation, as we like to call it, with regards to revenue management? Right now, 2017, what are some of the things that are going on, in your opinion?
A few things. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Well, from our side in Busy Rooms, we see a lot more transparency. Hotels are starting to ask a lot of the, not sure if this is working, a lot of the important questions in terms of what's our net, what's actually happening at the bottom line, whereas before, some of the information wasn't readily available for them, and it wasn't that transparent. So we're getting a lot more visibility there. The other thing that we're starting to see is a lot more focus on stimulating demand rather than just reacting to demand or historical information. So how can I actually drive that business in for myself as well? Which goes into a lot more focus on intent. And trying to see what we can do, what customers can do with the intent of a customer and personalization for that booker's experience. So taking it straight through from the data science all the way through to the actual booking process. I think that's what some of the key things. We have players of OTAs coming into the playground, such as Booking.com with Booking Suite, and then you also have a lot of other more economical solutions that are coming to the market. So it's providing more options for hoteliers to try to get that and gather their revenue management data and react to it.
Niels, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being I could do this with my eyes shut, and 1 being I have no idea what the hell I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. How in tune do you think hoteliers are generally with revenue management on a scale of 1 to 10?
On average, I think we're talking about a 5. I don't think anybody has achieved the 10 mark. I think 8 is probably the highest. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of anxiety within hoteliers' minds, because what they see is there's a lot of technology out there. They're not sure which technology to invest in. They're unsure about what will work for them. And they hear all of these fantastic success stories that are being relayed by vendors as well as other hoteliers, and they feel that they're going to be left out. So I think there's a lot of anxiety, and they don't really know what it is that they need to invest in order to, to get most out of their revenue management environment.
Okay, Paul, would you agree that it's a slightly pessimistic 5, or would you give hoteliers a little bit more credit and put them closer to a 10?
I think it's very fragmented. So I think you have both sides of the market. I think there's some early adopters, innovators that are doing some cutting edge things, and I think there's others that are sort of being left behind. And I think to Niels' point, it's very difficult for hotels to know what to get into, what to start with, and what is the right thing to do. And I think a lot of the disruption and things that are happening in the market and the different channels and the OTAs and the mergers and new channels coming up is causing confusion out there in the market. And there's some that are able to push that and guide that, some of the bigger brands, some of the OTAs that are steering things. I think it's difficult for some of the smaller hotels to be able to choose and navigate through that minefield, let's say.
Okay, and related, Michael, I mean, would you say it's an exciting time to be alive in revenue management?
It is, yeah. So just to add to the previous point, I think one of the challenges that hotels face is that they operate in a very legacy environment. So the solutions, and principally, so the PMSs were architected in a landscape that was very different 15 years ago. So any revenue management was designed and architected around a very linear distribution platform. So whilst revenue managers are coming into the marketplace and trying to understand, they've got innovative ideas. It's not that revenue managers are sort of archaic and dinosaur in nature. They're trying to do things, but they're trying to do it with legacy technology, versus compared to the OTAs, which are dynamic, fast-moving, lots of innovation in the technology stack. So that's starting to fragment now. New technologies are coming out, which are allowing revenue managers to explore some of the ideas that they've been thinking about for the last 15 years, but can now put into practice. So the environment is right for innovation and for innovative, forward-thinking revenue managers to really embrace those changes and implement some of their ideas that they've been thinking about, but weren't able to do.
Okay, Jason, for fear of saying a lot of people kind of hang on every word that Booking.com says, we are hanging on your word now because you get to go last. I mean, you've heard what your fellow panellists have said. What do you think about this kind of state of the nation? Just this kind of top line of where we are at the moment.
Well, I think what's interesting is that Booking doesn't have a very strong opinion about the day in, day out, the very nitty-gritty of revenue management. Booking is there effectively to provide good solutions for people to make those decisions. It's a facilitator on revenue management. I think what's interesting is the Booking Suite products that we've produced are very much aimed at hotels, properties between 20 and 100 rooms. We haven't gone either side of that, and I think it's quite a key thing for us to recognise that for Booking I love the fact that we get invited as a disruptor. We must be the oldest disruptor in the room. We were 20 years last year. So it's quite interesting that for probably 16, 17 years, we kept the customer at the centre of everything we did. So it doesn't matter what we did, the customer always came first. And I think in my experience, I've been with Booking for nearly 8 years now. The last 2 to 3 years, we've really focused in on what our accommodations want and what they need. And I think the suite products are very much an answer to that. But if you think about what we do internally with our partners in terms of answering their questions, listening very carefully, these are a good example of that. But I think the products that we produce are now giving smaller properties the chance to really sort of be much more effective in their pricing decisions. We're talking about a product which is one of the simplest to use. There isn't a massive amount of reporting behind it. It isn't there to do that. And I think what we're trying to do is facilitate that decision-making process. So smaller properties, people with less experience maybe, less knowledge, are able to action pricing in the right way.
I think many of the hoteliers in the room would disagree with you when you say that you're no longer disruptive. I think it would be fair to say that Booking.com is considered, for other reasons, quite disruptive, but I'll take your point. So let's think about, disruption generally. It's the theme of the conference. Paul, where is the disruption in revenue management as a discipline?
I think in revenue management, I think what's happening is just the availability of the data is what's changing a lot of the landscape. So previously, I think to Michael's point, the PMS was the key source of data. And I think with the change in the distribution landscape and the marketing data that's available and the things that we know about the customer as Booking.com is very well aware of, these things are what's changing in revenue management. It's just this availability of new data sources. And I think one of the things hotels are afraid of is putting all their eggs in one basket. So whether that's with the brand.com or with Booking.com or Google, whatever the case may be, I think hotels are trying to keep their options open as much as possible, which is both good and bad. So they're maybe not getting all the benefits of going down one path, but they are keeping their options open and they have the ability to be flexible. But it's causing that little limbo that I think that hotels are challenging with, is how do they then get to do what they want to do without going down a certain path in too much of a concrete way and locking themselves in.
Okay, Niels, first of all, do you agree? And what are you telling your customers to do if they're having the same kind of dilemmas that Paul mentions?
Data, I think, is a central point, and knowing data and understanding data. But data is a very complex thing, and I think Beverly said it on the panel earlier. She said, "I've got all this data and I don't know what to do with it," and that's exactly what the problem is. But at the other end is the guest. And everybody, as a hotelier, always talks about our job is to please our guests, and our job is to make them have a great stay. But what I also see is that there's a great disconnect between a lot of hoteliers and the guest. And the reason I say this is because we start looking at how can we enhance the guest experience. And a friend of mine actually last year stayed in a property in the center of the country. I won't go into detail which property it was, but he said, the booking experience was fantastic. I booked on my mobile. I got great pre-arrival correspondence. I was able to check in on my mobile. And then I arrived at the property, and it looked like it hadn't been touched since 1992. And it was such a disappointment. And this is the problem that we sometimes see, is that we, as hoteliers, we try to, stay at the forefront of everything, and sometimes we forget the basics. What does our guest really want? It's great to have a hotel like a Citizen M, which has great technology, which has a great product for its guests. But let's not forget, we have different types of guests, and we need to cater to what our guest wants. And it's, look at Marriott's, Marwood's, Starwood's, whatever it's called nowadays. They've got 30 different brands. 30 different brands, seriously. I mean, that's just unreal. And why has that been done? Because marketing found a little niche market that they needed to create a new brand for. Hilton just released another new brand. And it's, let's develop a new brand. But at the same time, when it comes down to revenue managers, what do? It's like, what are our competitors pricing at? Let's drop our rate by £2. Is that really where we want to go? Because if guests was purely looking at price, they would start booking at one-star hotels and work their way up. They don't want price, and that's one of the things that we always say in revenue management: price, price, price. It's not price; it's value, value, perception, value for money. That's what a guest is looking for, and a hotel in this hotel, or a room in this hotel, can be great value at a specific price point for one guest, and can be a horrible value for another guest. So I think it's looking at the guest and listening to the guest. Right.
I mean, that's interesting, Michael. I mean, do you sense that hoteliers are using revenue management just to help them with their price wars? Or are they, to his point, thinking it more about the terrible word, holistic experience?
The latter. Hotels need to start thinking about personalization. Booking.com certainly understand personalization. Every time a guest goes onto Booking.com, it's a great booking experience, and the guest feels like they're recognized and understood. Hotels need to start moving towards that. And one of the tools that allows hotels to start doing that and start to personalize their information, and certainly the price around that guest experience, is by hotels breaking this rigid structure within the PMS. At the moment, you'll have your best available rate, you'll have all your other rates linked to that by a fixed amount. So basically, every single person that comes to your website is being offered an undifferentiated price. It's the same price. And that's because that's the only way when that technology allowed for rates to be distributed. Now, with newer technologies, you can break those linkages, and you can start identifying genuine segments within your customer base and start offering them unique prices. Daniel said earlier, customers will shop around the OTAs, will land up at the hotel's website, and because they haven't got the hooks there, because the hotels aren't giving their guests a reason to book direct, they're flicking back to the OTAs and things like that. Once hotels can really utilize and understand their guests and price specifically to each and every guest segment, they'll be able to give the guests a reason to book direct, and that conversion will then improve.
Okay, so Casey, I mean, back to the question as well. So, where do you sense the disruption in revenue management is coming from your own perspective? But what are your hotel clients asking you for?
Well, first of all, I would definitely agree with what Michael and Neil were saying previously. What are our hotel clients asking for? I mentioned it in the beginning, is transparency. One of the things we did with our dashboard, our revenue management dashboard, is to try to simplify the complicated. So we took a lot of sophisticated information that a revenue manager would normally have to drill through multiple reports for, and try to present it in a very simple, easy to read format. so that the salient points are right there in front of them, and they didn't have to do all of the analysis that they may currently have to do if they're using an Excel spreadsheet or a legacy system. The other thing that we noticed in terms of, because we're a CRS, we have a different point of view than just a standalone revenue management system, that we're taking the customer, we're providing tools for both revenue management, distribution, as well as marketing. We kind of have all three departments working together when they're discussing their requirements with us. And we're seeing a movement away from relying on their legacy PMS to wanting to have that anything that has to do with sales and revenue management focused through their CRS, and even the revenue management system, if they're not using our own, that's tied into that structure rather than a legacy system. The other aspect of what they're looking for is a lot more requirements in terms of source data. They want to know where those bookings are coming from, not just on direct, but on through their third parties, as well as especially through meta-search. Because now they're trying to understand that cost of distribution, should I say cost of acquisition. Where is the money that the PPC or the SEM that they're spending on meta-search, is that being wasted and then being redirected through a booking.com? And they're not realizing it. How can they monitor and have an overall picture of where their business is actually coming from? So there's, as I said earlier, they're starting to ask those important questions, and we're trying to develop our technology as well to make sure that we can provide that information. One of the reasons we recently did an acquisition in terms of bringing loyalty into our suite is so that we can allow them to do more segmentation and work with their customers that are driving that can assist in driving direct business a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Casey. I mean, Jason, Booking.com has relationships with, I'm sure you can give me the number, X number of hotels, hundreds of thousands of hotels around the world. I mean, in the conversations that Booking.com has with them, certainly when you think of it through the prism of what you're trying to do with Booking Suite, which I know is for a particular type of hotel, what are the kind of things that they are asking from you to provide for them?
Well, I think the proof is in the products that we create, right? We don't create products because we have a good idea. We listen carefully to what people want. Yes, of course, we take into account the fact that there are opportunities. And I think also it's not just about revenue management, it's about websites as well. And going back to your point, Casey, about delivering data and information, the Web Direct product, the website creation product, cloud-based websites, has an enormous amount of data showing exactly what distribution channels you're selling through and where you stand from a sales perspective, right? But I think what we hear from our 1.2 million worldwide, 35,000 in the UK, just to answer your question.
Thank you. I said he'd do it, didn't
I? And I think at the last count. But look, we're listening very carefully to what makes people more effective and what people want. And I have to say, it's not always the case that people what people want is what people should have as well, because what we see is the customer behavior, that you're trying to bring customers to your property, and therefore just moving slightly away from the revenue management part. What we saw with people who genuinely wanted to sell more business via their own website, we found that the websites that they were using, some of them were quite frankly appalling. I mean, really appalling. Some people have great websites, but the reality is, we were answering the question, how do I get a good website that I don't have to keep paying someone more and more and more to update? But it's about actually having, these days, having a cloud-based, the most effective way to have a website. What does it really mean to own your own website and to be able to control it? Well, you have complete control of your website with the Web Direct product and Booking Suite. And that's another thing that people were asking for. So the two main things in the last couple of years that people wanted to know is, how do I have a really well-optimized website that gives me data to know exactly how it's working, who's distributing through it, and the second thing, obviously, as we discussed already, was the revenue management tool. And those are the things people are asking for.
Okay, so Paul, you get the awkward question. When you heard that Booking Suite was going to become a thing, what did you think?
I think it's an interesting way that Booking.com is addressing the market. So, trying to be the one-stop shop, I guess, in my view, the one-stop shop for hotels, which makes sense from their perspective, and for a lot of hotels as well. But I think really where, in our mind, the future lies is more in partnerships. So hotels are very keen to work with a partner that can support their goals, their initiatives, what they're trying to achieve. And similarly, from our side as a revenue management company, we know we can't do everything ourselves. So we are very much focused on forming partnerships with experts in marketing, in online distribution, in integrations, etc. Because by partnering, I think we will be successful, our hotels will be successful, and all our partners will be successful as well. So I think the future really lies in forming those partnerships and relationships and having that common goal and objective that's very broad-based and addresses the marketing, revenue management, distribution, and all those things, which is too much often for hotels to do on themselves, and hotels also need partners to do that effectively. So I think that's really where the future is going.
Michael, same question, but I will frame it around if one hotel customer said to you, I really like the look of that booking suite thing, because not only will they have a sort of one end on the consumer-facing things, but they can build my website for me. They've got the Hotel Ninjas thing can be the distribution mechanism, and the price match part of it can be the revenue management. It sounds great.
Yeah, so I'll qualify.
Presumably you said yes.
I'll qualify my answer by saying that for some hotels, it may make sense. But generally the people that we're speaking to, smaller groups of hotels, bigger city centre type hotels, and the further up the food chain you go, certainly this becomes more relevant. But I would say to those hotels, and we do, is do you want to put all your eggs in one basket? If you want to basically outsource your operation, your revenue management, your marketing to a single customer and accept that they're going to drive all your business, that's fine. That may actually suit some hotels. But in general, you need a diversification. You need to look at all opportunities in the marketplace, invest where it makes sense. Booking.com and Expedia have their place in the market to drive business demand from those markets that you don't have direct access to. But unless you want to completely forego any responsibility in terms of demand management and pricing, then I think it would be an unwise move to move down that path.
Okay, less diplomatic. Excellent. Right, so if anyone wants to disrupt me and my questions again, please just put your hands up. We've got one here. Can we have a microphone to the gent on the front table? Give us your name and where you're from, please, as well.
Hello, Adlen from Bridge Management in Paris. My question is about Airbnb, actually. I'm seeing today a lot of hotels, independent hotels, who are selling their rooms on the platform, on Airbnb. So, as experts, what do you recommend for these hotels? Are you for this kind of idea, letting hotels selling their rooms on the platform?
Okay, Casey, you can answer that one.
Definitely. If it's going to sell, get the room sold. Once it's not having an impact on your brand positioning, if it works for your property, go for it. I don't see a problem with it.
And Jason, you can answer that one as well.
Look, we sell the same accommodations, right? We overlap with Airbnb. I would of course tell someone to come and work with Booking.com because of everything else that we offer. It isn't just about commissions. It isn't just about the sort of small things day to day. The difference, I think, for when we say, would you work on Airbnb or would you work on Booking, is that we continue to invest all of our money into innovation through products, but also widening the net and making sure that people come from lots of different markets around the world. And we are so well established now in places like China, increasingly the US as well. US is a huge nut for us to crack as well, because Booking.com is not so well known in the US, but it's something that we work a lot on. And I think that these are the advantages of working with Booking, is that, as everyone knows, you can flick a switch and you can get bookings tomorrow. We don't spend our days talking to people about how you flick the switch. We talk to people about, if you flick the switch, what kind of customers do you want? And day to day, without going too far into it, if you're a hotelier, you can now move your ranking slightly for a certain market through the visibility booster. So there's lots of different things that you can do, and there's different advantages for working.
And to be fair, they can list on both, right?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, as long as you're available when someone books you on.
Of course.
But if you list on Airbnb, make sure that you do the key handover at the news agents across the street to make sure you stay in line with sort of their look and feel, right?
I think if I may, just on Airbnb, I think one of the things that they've done very well, I think, is understand the customer, right? So there's a big group of people in the market that want that type of product that they're offering, and also the way that they're offering it on their channel. So it's a distribution channel that is latched on to what the customer wants. And I think somebody on this panel mentioned earlier, the customer intent and what clients want is becoming incredibly important. So Airbnb kind of latched on to that. And I think for hotel revenue managers and marketing and hotels in general, the more you understand that customer intent, what the customer really wants, and have that flexibility to work with the channel that addresses that need, is going to be kind of the way forward. So really knowing what the customer wants, which I think was Neil's point earlier as well. But it's all going to be about data. So, a lot of it's, obviously in the hotels, working with the guests while they're in the hotels, all very important. But before you get to that stage, the data plays such a huge role that understanding and using that data in the right ways is becoming more and more important.
I think you've got to look at your hotel, at your property, and understand, do you have some rooms that are unique and exciting? Because that's what the Airbnb guest wants. They want something that is different, not just a box. So if you go and put all of your inventory out there, you're not really going to differentiate yourself against all of the other offerings out there. So it's an opportunity for hotels to compete with this alternative accommodation, but it needs to be done in a sensible way.
Right, so we're going to wrap up, and we're going to ask our panel here to gaze into their crystal balls, which you always do at the end of a panel. So forward-looking stuff now. We'll start with you, Jason, actually. Where does this all shake out? So you're doing what you're doing with Booking Suites, but just the general way that hotels behave, revenue management, where do you see this all kind of developing over the next, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years or so?
Well, I think we don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but there are things that we do that sometimes give us an edge, and that is really understanding and listening to our partners. But the core thing for us, as it always has been and always will be, is everything falls off the customer. We continue to listen to what the customer wants, whether it's this part of the journey, whether it's the whole journey, and everything that supports that. And what we do in that process is listen to our accommodations and listen also to our customers.
Okay, then, so just quickly then, what do you think the customer's going to want then in 2, 3 years' time? Let's reframe the question.
The customer, I think, wants a seamless delivery of whatever it wants. And so whatever that looks like in future, right. if it's a city break, from the very beginning to the end of that process, they want it to be seamless, they want it in one place, they want it with the right technology, and they don't want it to go wrong. But most of all, they want it to be really simple.
Right. Casey, you are next with our final question.
You rephrased the question correctly. What do the consumers want? Because revenue management is, reacting to what the consumers' intents are. And I think there's going to be, mentioned it earlier again, a lot more segmentation, but more personalization. Someone who wants a city break should not have the same user experience as someone who's going on a honeymoon, or someone who's looking for adventure tourism, or someone who's looking for a beach holiday. That experience is very different. If I'm going on a trip with my wife versus going on a trip for a bachelor party, that the requirements are going to be very different. So that experience needs to react to that.
Okay, Michael, changes in consumer and how that will affect revenue management.
Yeah. So the one thing that hotels have, and one advantage that hotels have against sort of the OTAs, the big distribution partners out there, is that you understand the guest when they're on your property. You understand their spend, you understand their likes, their dislikes. And hotels need to start leveraging that data. They need to start using that information about the guests. So whether they've stayed once or stayed 100 times at your hotel, because you understand them, because you have some insights into their behavior that the distribution partners don't have, you need to leverage that. And what I foresee happening is hotels combining that information about guest spend, guest experience on property to provide what Casey's describing in terms of understanding them better online when they're still in the search process. If you can do that, the hotels will use the OTAs, the meta searches, to find the right hotel. They'll end up on your website, and because you're exciting and delighting them with something that is very unique, you'll convert them.
Niels.
Guest is key. I think the total value of the guest, going down to profitability level is very important. We need to go down to not just distribution cost, but also cost on site. How much does it cost? What's the ideal length of stay on property? Those kind of things need to be taken into consideration when making revenue management decisions, excuse me. But one of the things that we really need to try and do, and one of the things I'm sure guests want, is that iPad moment. An offer of a value proposition that is there before you knew that you even wanted it. So, and then price becomes much less relevant. And what we need to move towards in revenue management is longer term vision and offering the right product at the right value, and not at the right price, at the right value to the right guest. And this is something that's the most important. And that's where I think it's heading.
Okay, and Paul, as our man in the middle, you get to go last.
Well, I guess kind of maybe to summarize, I think what's been said by some of the others is, I think if you're in marketing or distribution or revenue management right now, in the next 2 or 3 years, your job is going to be completely different. And those roles are going to merge more and more. So if you're not just setting a price, you're talking about the customer value, you're looking at their booking channel, that is becoming more and more important. So if you're in any of those roles, start learning the other functions, because that's going to be a big part of your job, whether you're in revenue management or marketing or distribution. There's going to be convergence of those roles in the next few years.
Excellent. Right. So Jason, Michael, Paul, Niels and Casey, thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the panel. Thank you.